events as a result of Russian activity, but the online harms bill is there to provide such protections.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement, and indeed thank the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition for his supportive and moving words. But can I also reinforce the point made by my honourable friend for Huntingdon? Why has it come to this pass? How has the West in general, and the United Kingdom in particular, been so asleep at the switch for such a long period of time? And I commend the Defence and Security Review, but isn't it now time to ask what the permanent and impartial machinery of our government does, failing to provide ministers with consistent advice about the strategic threats that our country faces?
Mr. Speaker, I think there are all sorts of reasons for the failure of the West to take sufficient account of the threat of Vladimir Putin since 2014, but the two biggest are oil and gas.
Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, with cyber attacks and falsehoods, Russia is peddling lies today. Now, observers on the ground are crucial to relay the truth. Now, in recent weeks, the UK has withdrawn its team from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission because staff safety is key. But can the Prime Minister look again to support international efforts like this to get to the facts and counter Russian disinformation?
I thank the MMR teams. They're wonderful. I've met them, and they do a fantastic job. I'm sorry that they've had to be withdrawn for the duty of care reasons that he rightly alludes to, and we will keep it under constant review.
Liam Fox.
The 1994 Budapest Memorandum saw Ukraine give up its nuclear weapons in return for a security guarantee not only signed by Britain and the United States, but by Russia. Does my right honourable friend believe that Ukraine would have been invaded had it retained its nuclear weapons? And what does it say about the value of a Russian signature on any international agreement?
Well, it's clear that President Putin sets no store by international law, whatever, and that is just one of the legal obligations that he has torn up.
Kirsty Black.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, we awoke this morning to images of innocent families cowering in tube stations. We know the Putin regime's propensity for oppression and tyranny, particularly when it comes to minorities. Will the Prime Minister ensure that humanitarian aid is delivered not just in concert with other international partners, but also with third sector organisations?
Yes, of course. The third sector plays an invaluable role.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's statement and his specifically ruling out the threat of creeping normalisation, because this House should be under no doubt that Putin is well prepared. He has hundreds of billions of foreign currency reserves. He has a military that has been tested. And will the Prime Minister do everything he can to convert the current intent into frameworks that cement our intent over time, because he is betting on the fact that it won't be?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, because the plan that the G7 have agreed on and our friends and partners have agreed on is that Putin must fail. Putin must not succeed in this venture. But we've got to put in place all the steps we need to take, diplomatically, economically, and yes, militarily, in order to ensure that that is the case. And that's what we're doing.
Very good.
The Prime Minister is right to have set out the most stringent possible set of sanctions against the government of Russia. Can he outline for the House what the implications will also be for cooperation at the International Space Station?
I thank him. I thank him very much. We will have to see what further downstream effects there are on collaboration of all kinds. I must say that hitherto I have been broadly in favour of continuing artistic and scientific collaboration, but in the current circumstances it's hard to see how even those can continue as normal.
Sir John Hayes.
Speaker, the mix of practice and principle is the test of democratic politics, exemplified at its best when this House comes together in common cause. The test of leadership is the mix of vision and will, and the Prime Minister is to be commended for his willful, clear-sighted determination. So will he now reassure the House that he's in close touch with those countries close to Ukraine, where nerves will be frayed, and that will he send them an urgent message that this House and this nation will always stand alongside and behind free nations?
He is, the right honourable gentleman, as so often, is precisely right, and that's why, together with my right honourable friends, the Defence Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, we've been visiting Poland, Romania, the Balts, all those who are now feeling such deep unease at what is happening.
Alistair Carmike.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we speak, the Softcom Flot tanker NS Challenger is berthed at Sullomvo in Shetland, taking on a load of crude oil for export. Softcom Flot, as the Prime Minister may know, is a company owned and operated by the Russian government. My constituents, Mr. Speaker, are asking me why they should be loading oil onto a Russian tanker while Russian troops are marching into the Ukraine. I cannot think of any good answer to give them. So, can the Prime Minister tell me, will anything that he has announced today ensure that that will not happen again in the future?
Well, I can tell him, thank him very much, and I will of course immediately investigate what is happening with the Softcom Flot oil tanker. But the result of the measures that the House passed the other day is that we can now target any entity, any company that has any relation with the Russian state. So we have that power.
Tim Bolton.
Speaker, tyrants and megalomaniacs invade countries because they think they can get away with it. And the way to deal with bullies is to stand up with them. So I'm sure he will acknowledge that the way the West responds to this aggression will have repercussions not just for Russia and Ukraine, but for other bullies like China as well. And will he be mindful of the need to show support to Russia's smaller southerly neighbours, especially Georgia and Armenia, who feel particularly vulnerable at this time?
Yes, I thank him. He's right, because the read across, the knock-on is obvious for Georgia and Armenia. What he proposes to create, Putin, is a new sphere of influence, a new Yalta, in which those countries come behind his new Iron Curtain.
Stephen Wakeford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of this House with Ukrainian heritage, this issue particularly troubles me. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for his tone of his statement and the resolute and swift action that he's proposing in tackling Russia, but the resolute and swift support he's offering to the people of Ukraine. During his speech, he also highlighted the issues of the cost of living and the rise of fuel prices. Could he also touch on what further action the government will take in order to address that issue?
I thank him very much, and I think he's quite right, because I think people across the country will be thinking about the effect on us all of the increase in the price of oil and gas as a result of a war in Ukraine. We will continue to do everything we can to help people to abate the cost, to support people through councils, through all the funds that we're giving, the reduction in council tax, Mr. Speaker. But the best thing that we can do is ensure that people are in good, well-paying jobs, and that is in that we are certainly succeeding. But in the medium and the long term, we've got to have more self-reliance in this country on our own energy supplies, and that is what this government is also committed to building.
Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Mr. Speaker, one of the most important economic sanctions we can take against Russia is by freezing its sovereign debt. Will my right honourable friend confirm that the bill proposed on Monday on economic crime will include powers to do so?
Mr. Speaker, we're taking the most powerful measures against Russia and the Russian economy that have ever been taken. I think probably the most powerful ever taken by any country. And Russia will no longer be able to raise any sovereign debt on UK markets.
Olivia Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister what support we will be providing Ukrainian citizens settled in the UK who wish to reunite with their family members still residing in Ukraine, many have watched their cities rapidly get caught up in this conflict and are keen to know what more we could be doing to support them to reunite their families.
Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that we support Ukrainian nationals who need to leave to visit to come to this country to meet their relatives. Of course, we'll do that.
Stephen McPartland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud the Prime Minister in this country are leading international support for our friends in Ukraine. Domestically, will the Prime Minister be providing more support for organisations such as our NHS, public sector organisations and businesses that will now be the subject of Russian cyber attacks?
He's right to point to this risk, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's foresighted. We're investing massively in cyber protection. I think another £2.6 billion we're putting in. I think in the last few years we've tackled more than 3,000 cyber attacks. It is a risk. It's a risk that I'm afraid we must run in the cause of freedom.
Matt Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to offer my wholehearted support for much tougher sanctions against President Putin and his dreadful regime. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman from Lockerbie mentioned earlier, there are many historic Ukrainian communities in Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and indeed I would like to commend the work of the Reading Ukrainian Centre. I would like to ask the Prime Minister what additional support can the government give to these very valuable community groups and centres around the country who offer such support to families, friends, relatives, both in the UK and in the Ukraine.
I think, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the most important thing we can do for the Ukrainian community in this country is thank them, recognise them for everything that they've done for us in the last decades. They've been an amazing addition to the UK economy, to our cultural and artistic life.
John Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House is united in its condemnation, but I suggest to the Prime Minister that the lessons to be addressed from this affair started with the invasion of Georgia, Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008 and not 2014. And given, many of us across the House have been warning about Russia, and yet the response has been weak. Does the Prime Minister accept that as we enter the battle for democracy globally, we have got to understand that the sooner you square up to the playground bully, the better, and that we adequately support our hard and soft power to do that?
Yes, he is quite right, and I know that by soft power he's thinking also of the British Council, which can have such a wonderful beneficial effect across Russia, and I've seen its work across Russia. But Mr. Speaker, he's right about standing up to the playground bully. We should have done it ages ago. I think the scales have fallen from the eyes of many of our friends and partners.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. In an earlier response, the Prime Minister suggested that this country would welcome people who were reuniting with family here. I have a constituent who's Ukrainian, but a British citizen who's trying to bring her mother from Ukraine, but being turned down because she is over 18. Her mother is on her own, has no family, so naturally she's frightened. So will we see a change in the Home Office to enable British citizens who are Ukrainian to bring their vulnerable family here?
Yes, I thank her very much. I think I read out a helpline number in the House on Tuesday. I don't have it again. There is a number both in Lviv and in this country. But if she could do me the favour and send me the details, well, I'll take them up.
Richard Drax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend my honourable friend and his ministers for the firm stance they're taking? None of us know where or what Mr. Putin's longer-term aims are. If Ukraine falls, and I fear it might, his covetous eye might land on the Baltic states and other vulnerable countries. Can my right honourable friend reassure NATO members that if one Russian boot lands on NATO soil, military force will be met by military force?
Yes, and what is so encouraging, Mr. Speaker, is that the whole House understands the vital importance of that Article 5 guarantee that we make to every one of the 30 members of NATO.
Tony Lloyd. Sir Tony.
The Prime Minister quite rightly pits this as being a battle between the party of war and those who support international law. There is only one lawful government in Ukraine. That's the government of President Zelensky. If they are forced to move, forced possibly into exile in the short run or the longer run, will the Prime Minister state very clearly that we will make sure they can be a functional and effective government wherever they operate from?
It's a very important point that he raises. I'm grateful, and that's why in our discussions with President Zelensky we are seeing what we can do to give them the practical support that they need to continue.
Robert Jenry.
The City of London is a global asset whose enduring success doesn't rest on dirty money. It rests on a commitment to excellence and on the adherence with the rule of law. So it's right that we now use that as a way to show global leadership. Can I encourage my right honourable friend to sanction all of the remaining Russian banks, to sanction the executives associated with them, and I notice that many are resigning today, to publish a further list of individuals, resident in this country or otherwise, to be sanctioned, and to redouble his excellent efforts to suspend Russia from SWIFT as the single most effective immediate step that the West could do to put pressure on Vladimir Putin.
I thank him very much. I thank him particularly for his important testimonial to the City of London, whose work should not be sullied, Mr. Speaker, by association with ill-gotten Russian money. But the programme that he set out for sanctions is exactly the right one, and the one the government is following.
Mike Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Will the Prime Minister reiterate that our quarrel is not with the Russian people? It is with their leader, Vladimir Putin, and he has committed a very, very grave error.
He is so right, and I know that is what the House thinks. We admire the Russian people. Our links to the Russian people go back to the time when we stood shoulder to shoulder to fight fascism with the Russian people. Russia's contribution to culture, to art, to literature is to music unparalleled. It is an extraordinary country, and nothing that we do or say should obscure that.
Shreberley.
Winston Churchill created the Council of Europe as a bastion against fascism and communism. And since the fall of communism, Russia has set great importance by its membership as a fig leaf of respectability. Every time our Conservative group has tried to get them expelled, we've been foiled by Russian gold. Will the Prime Minister now instruct his ambassador on the Council of Europe to move for the immediate expulsion of Russia from the Council of Europe so there is no place for gangsters in the halls of civilized nations?
Yes, I think eloquently put, Mr. Speaker, and he's dead right. And I think that my honourable friend for Henley made the point the other day, and I certainly, who's on the Council of Europe, and I certainly agree with that.
Geraint Davis.
Mr. Speaker, so many Russians today see the attack on Ukraine as they would see an attack of their father on their mother, because there's such intimate family relationships between these two groups. And today, thousands of Russians are protesting in cities against their domestic law, against this awful war. Will he provide them with his support? Will he amplify their support to help reduce the support, any support there is for this ridiculous war, and also provide sanction and safe haven for people, refugees, including troops who may want to re-engage, for the troops outside of Ukraine, so they can re-engage, so we can win this war at home and abroad?
He makes a series of extremely important observations, and yes, I think it's vital that we get the message across to the whole of Russia about what is really going on. They're being lied to day after day, and I think that his point about supporting troops who need temporary exile, as it were, is a very good one.
Peter Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for yet again coming to House to keep us informed, and for his leadership in this crisis. He was right to provide military aid to Ukraine, but the Ukrainian ambassador did ask for our support in a no-fly zone today. In his answer earlier, I think the Prime Minister was keeping that option open. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear to the House, Mr. Speaker, that we're trying to keep all our options open on this front. Some of them, frankly, may be more practicable than others, and I think we must also have a dose of realism about what we can do on the military front. But we will keep all things under review.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many of the residents in my constituency come from a number of the countries on the eastern flank and still have relatives living there. Obviously, like us, they will be deeply concerned about the humanitarian impact of the crisis. So, what steps is the government taking to prepare for the humanitarian issues? And with the 1,000 troops on standby to help with humanitarian assistance, will they now be deployed?
I think she raised a very important point, and what we're seeing now, tragically, is people moving west out of Kyiv, columns of traffic, as I'm sure the House knows. People already moving into southeastern Poland. There is going to be an influx, as I said to the President of Poland, Prime Minister of Poland as well. We're there to help.
Laura Trott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for his statement today and for his strong package of sanctions. I want to ask him about preventing sexual violence in conflict. In November last year, we issued a strong statement which said that the use of sexual violence as a weapon in conflict is a red line akin to the use of chemical weapons. Will he reaffirm that commitment today, and will he send a strong message to Russia that the international community will not tolerate the use of sexual violence in conflict?
Yes, and I thank her for all the work that she's done on that issue. It's something that the UK government has campaigned on for a long time, and indeed raised the issue very greatly in public international consciousness. I think it should be treated as a war crime like any other, and people who perpetrate sexual violence in conflict can expect to be tried in those tribunals.
Sean Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In seeking to redraw the boundaries of Europe through bloodshed, Putin has attacked not only the Ukraine but all of us, and we stand with the Ukraine in standing for the rule of law. I welcome the sanctions that he's announced, but I was confused by his response on Russian disinformation, which he seemed to imply would be addressed by the online safety bill. That is many, many, many months away. Russian disinformation is organised, their bots are state-sponsored. What steps will he take to address them?
I thank her. We've got and she raised a good point, but we've got, what we're doing is a massive, positive Stratcoms campaign in Russian, in Ukrainian, to make sure that people get the truth and they hear the truth.
Adam Holloway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we've noticed this afternoon, virtually everyone in this House has supported the efforts towards resistance over the last few months and in these days. I imagine the House will also support the very different sort of warfare under occupation over the coming months and possibly years. But the House will also have noticed the marvellous way the Prime Minister has spoken directly to the Russian people today. And I hope that he will bear in mind that at the moment public opinion in Russia is rather different. That does underline the importance of accurate information.
Prime Minister.
Yes. He is quite right, and I thank him. He's a distinguished former soldier, and he knows that truth is the first casualty. We have to make sure that we are telling people exactly what is going on, and to the best of my knowledge at the moment, the Ukrainians are resisting much more strongly than some people had thought that they would. Who knows how long they can keep going? Let's hope they can, and let's encourage them to do so. But, Mr. Speaker, let's get the message out as well. I think that is our job.
Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is absolutely right. We equivocated shamelessly after Crimea. We were spineless. We must not be spineless now, because what will inevitably happen is either the Baltic states, one of the members of NATO, or perhaps Sweden or Finland will feel the wrath of Putin next. And that will mean British action. Don't we need to try and set in train now a process whereby Putin himself ends up in the dock in a court? Norman Burkitt said, who was the alternate British judge at Nuremberg, said at Nuremberg, initiating a war of aggression is not only an international crime, it is the supreme international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. He must be brought to a court of law and end his days in prison, mustn't he?
Mr. Speaker, I think one of the most fascinating things about what Putin is doing is how close an analogy there is between his actions and those of Slobodan Milosevic. Exactly the same nonsense being peddled about the mystical union between Kosovo and Belgrade as between Kiev and Moscow. Exactly the same aggression, and remember that Slobodan Milosevic died on trial.
Sorry. Mark Harper.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the package of sanctions set out by the Prime Minister and the fact that he's confirmed more will come. If they are to be successful at punishing President Putin for what he has done to date and deterring him from going further and attacking our NATO partners, they must be sustained. And if they're to be sustained, we must be honest with the British people that there is going to be a cost for them. We are going to have to pay an economic cost, but it's a cost we must pay, and it pales into insignificance compared to the cost of the people of Ukraine.
Yes, and not only is that true, Mr. Speaker, but the opportunity and the reward for success and being strong is huge. Because if this should end, Mr. Speaker, with the rejection of aggression and the rejection of the Putin regime's view of the world, then that would be a massive, massive benefit, and an economic benefit as well, to the whole world.
Chamberlain.
Mr. Speaker, up until May 2021, Valentina Yakovleva was my constituent. She resided in Scotland for 20 years with her daughter and her family. But due to an initial error in an application, she eventually exhausted appeals and was deported with 2 COVID jags last year. Now that 71-year-old is sheltering in a subway. In response to the Honourable Member for Central Ayrshire, who's no longer in her place, I would reiterate, does the Prime Minister agree with me that as we face a likely refugee crisis, the UK must be doing all it can to extract individuals who have immediate family relatives in the UK, and urge for support for this case?
Yes. Again, I thank her very much for drawing the case to my attention. If she sends me the details, I'll be happy to make sure it's properly taken up by the Home Office.
Can I just say, those who didn't get in, we have got a list for next time, because this will definitely not be the end. OK, let people leave before I come to you, Chairman.
All right, folks, it should... All right, folks, give me 1 second. 1 second. All right, folks, give me 1 second. We're going to be switching over right now.
difficulty concentrating.
All right, folks. So we are waiting for Biden. We're also waiting for the White House to give us access into the area where he's going to be delivering his speech. Stay tuned live here at Golden State Times. We're trying to see what's going on. All right, folks, so we have footage from inside the White House now. Just give me a second, I'll put it up on your screen. We're just have to see if we have the hot mic on. So just give me 1 second here. So it looks like we do have the hot mic on. So give me 1 second. Let's see here. All right, so this is live footage from inside of the White House as we await Biden. For Biden to come out. Biden is taking forever to come out, like always. But we are ready to go here at Golden State Times. Make sure you guys please share the live stream on social media. Don't forget to click the thumbs up button, folks. That helps us out here at Golden State Times.
Sorry to keep you waiting. Good afternoon. The Russian military has begun a brutal assault on the people of Ukraine. Without provocation, without justification, without necessity, this is a premeditated attack. Vladimir Putin has been planning this for months, as we've been saying all along. He moved more than 175,000 troops, military equipment, and positions along the Ukrainian border. He moved blood supplies into position and built a field hospital, which tells you all you need to know about his intentions all along. He rejected every good faith effort the United States and our allies and partners made to address our mutual security concerns through dialogue to avoid needless conflict and avert human suffering. For weeks, we have been warning that this would happen. And now, it's unfolding largely as we predicted. In the past week, we've seen shelling increase in the Donbass, a region in eastern Ukraine controlled by Russian-backed separatists. The Russian government has perpetrated cyber attacks against Ukraine. We saw a staged political theater in Moscow, outlandish and baseless claims that Ukraine was about to invade and launch a war against Russia, that Ukraine was prepared to use chemical weapons, that Ukraine committed a genocide. Without any evidence, we saw a flagrant violation of international law in attempting to unilaterally create two new so-called republics on sovereign Ukrainian territory. And at the very moment that the United Nations Security Council was meeting to stand up for Ukraine's sovereignty, to stave off invasion, Putin declared his war. Within moments, missile strikes began to fall on historic cities across Ukraine. Then came the air raids, followed by tanks and troops rolling in. We've been transparent with the world. We've shared declassified evidence about Russia's plans and cyber attacks and false pretexts so that there could be no confusion or cover-up about what Putin was doing. Putin is the aggressor. Putin chose this war, and now he and his country will bear the consequences. Today, I'm authorizing additional strong sanctions and new limitations on what can be exported to Russia. This is going to impose severe cost on the Russian economy, both immediately and over time. We have purposely designed these sanctions to maximize the long-term impact on Russia and to minimize the impact on the United States and our allies. And I want to be clear, the United States is not doing this alone. For months, we've been building a coalition of partners representing well more than half the global economy. 27 members of the European Union, including France, Germany, Italy, as well as the United Kingdom, Canada, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and many others, to amplify the joint impact of our response. I just spoke with the G7 leaders this morning, and we're in full and total agreement. We will limit Russia's ability to do business in dollars, euros, pounds, and yen to be part of the global economy. We'll limit their ability to do that. We're going to stunt the ability to finance and grow the Russian military. We're going to impose and we're going to impair their ability to compete in high-tech 21st century economy. We've already seen the impact of our actions on Russia's currency and the ruble, which early today hit its weakest level ever in history. The Russia stock market plunged today. The Russian government borrowing rate spiked by over 15%. In today's actions, we've now sanctioned Russian banks that together hold around $1 trillion in assets. We've cut off Russia's largest bank, a bank that holds more than 1/3 of Russia's banking assets by itself, cut it off from the U.S. financial system. And today, we're also blocking 4 more major banks. That means every asset they have in America will be frozen. This includes VTB, the second largest bank in Russia, which has $250 billion in assets. As promised, we're also adding the names to the list of Russian elites and their family members that we're sanctioning as well. As I said on Tuesday, these are people who personally gain from the Kremlin's policies, and they should share in the pain. We will keep up this drumbeat of those designations against corrupt billionaires in the days ahead. On Tuesday, we stopped the Russian government from raising money from U.S. or European investors. Now we're going to apply the same restrictions to Russia's largest state-owned enterprises, companies with assets that exceed $1.4 trillion. Some of the most powerful impacts of our actions will come over time as we squeeze Russia's access to finances and technology for strategic sectors of its economy and degrade its industrial capacity for years to come. Between our actions and those of our allies and partners, we estimate that we'll cut off more than half of Russia's high-tech imports. It will strike a blow to their ability to continue to modernize their military. It will degrade their aerospace industry, including their space program. It will hurt their ability to build ships, reducing their ability to compete economically. And it will be a major hit to Putin's long-term strategic ambitions. And we're preparing to do more. In addition to the economic penalties we're imposing, we're also taking steps to defend our NATO allies, particularly in the East. Tomorrow, NATO will convene a summit. We'll be there to bring together the leaders of 30 allied nations and close partners to affirm our solidarity and to map out the next steps we will take to further strengthen all aspects of our NATO alliance. Although we provided over $650 million in defensive assistance to Ukraine just this last year, let me say it again. Our forces are not and will not be engaged in the conflict with Russia in Ukraine. Our forces are not going to Europe to fight in Ukraine, but to defend our NATO allies and reassure those allies in the East. As I made crystal clear, the United States will defend every inch of NATO territory with the full force of American power. And the good news is, NATO is more united and more determined than ever. There is no doubt that the United States and every NATO ally will meet our Article 5 commitments, which says an attack on one is an attack on all. Over the past few weeks, I ordered thousands of additional forces to Germany and Poland as part of our commitment to NATO. On Tuesday, in response to Russia's aggressive action, including its troop presence in Belarus and the Black Sea, I've authorized the deployment of ground and air forces already stationed in Europe to NATO's eastern flank allies, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, Poland, and Romania. Our allies have also been stepping up, adding the other allies, the rest of NATO, adding their own forces and capabilities to ensure collective defense. And today, within hours of Russia's unleashing its assault, NATO came together and authorized and activated an activation of response plans. This will enable NATO's high readiness forces to deploy and when and where they are needed to protect our NATO allies on the eastern boundaries of Europe. And now I'm authorizing additional U.S. force capabilities to deploy to Germany as part of NATO's response, including some of the U.S.-based forces that the Department of Defense placed on standby weeks ago. I've also spoken with Defense Secretary Austin and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Milley, about preparations for additional moves should they become necessary to protect our NATO allies and support the greatest military alliance in the history of the world, NATO. As we respond, my administration is using the tools, every tool at its disposal to protect American families and businesses from rising prices at the gas pump. You know, we're taking active steps to bring down the cost, and American oil and gas companies should not exploit this moment to hike their prices to raise profits. You know, in our sanctions package, we specifically designed to allow energy payments to continue. We are closely monitoring energy supplies for any disruption. We've been coordinating with major oil producing and consuming countries toward our common interest to secure global energy supplies. We are actively working with countries around the world to elevate collective release from the strategic petroleum reserves of major energy consuming countries. And the United States will release additional barrels of oil as conditions warrant. I know this is hard and that Americans are already hurting. I will do everything in my power to limit the pain the American people are feeling at the gas pump. This is critical to me. But this aggression cannot go unanswered. If it did, the consequences for America would be much worse. America stands up to bullies. We stand up for freedom. This is who we are. Let me also repeat the warning I made last week. If Russia pursues cyber attacks against our companies, our critical infrastructure, we are prepared to respond. For months, we've been working closely with the private sector to harden our cyber defenses, sharpen our ability to respond to Russian cyber attacks as well. I spoke last night to President Zelensky of Ukraine, and I assured him that the United States, together with our allies and partners in Europe, will support the Ukrainian people as they defend their country. We'll provide humanitarian relief to ease their suffering. And in the early days of this conflict, Russia propaganda outlets will keep trying to hide the truth and claim success for its military operation against a made-up threat. But history has shown, time and again, how swift gains in territory eventually give way to grinding occupations, acts of mass civil disobedience, and strategic dead ends. The next few weeks and months will be hard on the people of Ukraine. Putin has unleashed a great pain on them, but the Ukrainian people have known 30 years of independence. They have repeatedly shown that they will not tolerate anyone who tries to take their country backwards. This is a dangerous moment for all of Europe, for the freedom around the world. Putin has committed an assault on the very principles that uphold the global peace. But now, the entire world sees clearly what Putin and his Kremlin allies are really all about. This was never about a genuine security concerns on their part. It was always about naked aggression, about Putin's desire for empire by any means necessary, by bullying Russia's neighbors through coercion and corruption, by changing borders by force, and ultimately by choosing a war without a cause. Putin's actions betray his sinister vision for the future of our world, one where nations take what they want by force. But it is a vision that the United States and freedom-loving nations everywhere will oppose with every tool of our considerable power. The United States and our allies and partners will emerge from this stronger, more united, more determined, and more purposeful. And Putin's aggression against Ukraine will end up costing Russia dearly, economically and strategically. We will make sure of that. Putin will be a pariah on the international stage. Any nation that countenances Russia's naked aggression against Ukraine will be stained by association. When the history of this era is written, Putin's choice to make a totally unjustifiable war on Ukraine will have left Russia weaker and the rest of the world stronger. Liberty, democracy, human dignity, these are the forces far more powerful than fear and oppression. They cannot be extinguished by tyrants like Putin and his armies. They cannot be erased by from people's hearts and hopes by any amount of violence and intimidation. They endure. In the contest between democracy and autocracy, between sovereignty and subjugation, make no mistake, freedom will prevail. God bless the people of a free and democratic Ukraine. May God protect our troops.
Mr. President.
Associated Press, Zeke.
With President Putin at this point, and what interactions have you had with the Russian government?
I heard the first part. Do I have any plans to speak with Putin at this point, and what?
What communications have you had with the Kremlin as far as military operations in Ukraine and making sure this does not spiral into a larger conflict?
Well, it's a large conflict already. The way we're going to ensure it's not going to aspire to a larger conflict is by providing all the forces needed in the Eastern European nations that are members of NATO. NATO is more united than it's ever been, and I have no plans to talk with Putin. Wall Street Journal, Tarina.
Mr. President, you didn't mention SWIFT in your sanctions that you announced. Is there a reason why the U.S. Isn't doing that? Is there a disagreement among allies regarding SWIFT and whether Russia should be allowed to be a part of it?
The sanctions that we have proposed on all their banks have of equal consequence, maybe more consequence than SWIFT, number one. Number two, it is always an option, but right now that's not the position that the rest of Europe wishes to take. Cecilia Vega, ABC.
Sir, sanctions clearly have not been enough to deter Vladimir Putin to this point. What is going to stop him? How and when does this end? And do you see him trying to go beyond Ukraine? And a second question I'll just give to you now. This statement that he gave last night, the threat that he gave, the West will face consequences greater than any you have faced in history. Is he threatening a nuclear strike?
I have no idea what he's threatening. I know what he has done, number one. And number two, no one expected the sanctions to prevent anything from happening. It has to show, this is going to take time, and we have to show resolve so he knows what's coming. And so the people of Russia know what he's brought on them. That's what this is all about. This is going to take time. It's not going to occur. He's going to say, oh my God, these sanctions are coming, I'm going to stand down. He's going to test the resolve of the West to see if we stay together, and we will. We will, and it will impose significant costs on him.
Will he go beyond Ukraine, sir? Do you see him going beyond?
Yes.
Two topics, just really quick. First, markets are down and gas prices are up. I know you always stress the difference between Wall Street and Main Street, but everybody seems to be in for some economic pain. How economically painful is it going to get for people in this country? And I do have one more question.
First of all, there's no doubt that when a major nuclear power attacks and invades another country, that the world is going to respond, and markets can respond all over the world. So there's no doubt about that, number one. Number two, the notion that this is going to last for a long time is highly unlikely as long as we continue to stay resolved in imposing the sanctions we're going to impose on Russia, period. What's the next question? I'm sorry.
The next question is, did you underestimate Putin, and would you still describe him the way that you did in the summer as a worthy adversary?
At the time, he was, I made it clear, as an adversary, and I said he was worthy. I didn't underestimate him. And I've read most of everything he's written. Did you read the, I shouldn't, I'm not being a wise guy. You heard the speech he made, almost an hour's worth of speeches, why he was going into Ukraine. He has much larger ambitions in Ukraine. He wants to, in fact, reestablish the former Soviet Union. That's what this is about. And I think that his ambitions are completely contrary to the place where the rest of the world has arrived.
You're confident that these devastating sanctions are going to be as devastating as Russian missiles and bullets and tanks?
Yes, Russian bullets, missiles, and tanks in Ukraine. Yes, I am.
Thank you, President Biden. If sanctions cannot stop President Putin, what penalty can?
I didn't say sanctions couldn't stop him.
You've been talking about the threat of these sanctions for several weeks now.
Yes, but the threat of the sanctions and imposing the sanctions and seeing the effect of the sanctions are two different things. They're two different things. And he's going to begin to see the effect of the sanctions.
And what will that do? How will that change his mindset here, given he's
Because it
attacking
will so
Ukraine
weaken his
speak?
country that he'll have to make a very, very difficult choice as to whether to continue to move toward being a second-rate power or, in fact, respond.
You said in recent weeks that big nations cannot bluff when it comes to something like this. You recently said that the idea of personally sanctioning President Putin was on the table. Is that a step that you're prepared to take? And if
It's not a bluff, it's on the table.
Sanctioning President Putin?
Yes.
Why not sanction him today, sir?
Mr. President?
Why not sanction him today, sir?
Mr. President, if I can, you detailed some severe and swift new sanctions today and said the impact it will have over time. But given the full-scale invasion, given that you're not pursuing disconnecting Russia from what's called SWIFT, the international banking system, or other sanctions at your disposal, respectfully, sir, what more are you waiting for?
Specifically, with the sanctions we've imposed exceed SWIFT. The sanctions we imposed exceed anything that's ever been done. The sanctions we imposed have generated 2/3 of the world joining us. They are profound sanctions. Let's have a conversation in another month or so to see if they're working. Yes.
Can I ask you about Zelensky? Sir, you spoke to Vladimir Zelensky yesterday, sir.
What's the risk that we are watching the beginning of another Cold War, and is there now a complete rupture in U.S. and Russian relations?
There is a complete rupture right now in U.S.-Russian relations if they continue on this path that they're on. And in terms of a Cold War, that depends. You have the vast majority of the rest of the world in total opposition to what he's doing, from Asia to South America to Europe to around the world. And so it's going to be a cold day for Russia. The idea, you don't see a whole lot of people coming to his defense.
And are you, if I could follow up, sir, are you urging China to help isolate Russia? Are you urging China to help isolate Russia?
I'm not prepared to comment on that at the moment. Wait, no. Yeah. No. He's had his hand up a long time.
Thank you, Mr. President. How concerned are you that Putin wants to go beyond Ukraine into other countries and the U.S. will have to get involved if he moves into NATO countries?
Well, if he did move into NATO countries, he will be involved. We will be involved. The only thing that I'm convinced of is if we don't stop now, he'll be emboldened. If we don't move against him now with these significant sanctions, he will be emboldened. And look, anyway.
Can you talk anything more about your conversation? Mr. President.
Why not sanction Putin directly today?
Defense partner for the
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Sir, India, which is a major defense partner of the United States, is India fully with you on the issue of Ukraine and Russia?
Does the Defense Department of the United States...
Sir, India is one of your major defense partners. Is India fully in sync with the United States on Russia?
We're in consultation with India today. We haven't resolved that completely.
One more question.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you.
All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us here at Golden State Times. As you guys can see, Biden is out of here. Now, there's going to be a White House press briefing in just a few moments. If you're watching this after it's uploaded, it should be coming up on your screen. If you're still on the live stream, make sure you guys click on our logo, or you guys can check it out when the live stream ends. It'll hopefully redirect you over to the live stream of Jen Jen has a White House press briefing coming up very, very soon. Thank you so much for joining us here at Golden State Times. If you are new to the channel, we encourage you to subscribe and click that notification bell. Once again, if you're new to the channel, we encourage you to subscribe and click that bell. There's a White House press briefing coming up in just a few moments, so make sure that you guys join us for that live stream. Hopefully, YouTube redirects you after this live stream is we shut this live stream down and we start the next one. Thank you so much, folks, and everyone that shared the live stream. God bless every single one of you. Have a blessed rest of your day. If you guys are going to join us for the White House press briefing, then awesome. If you can't, then watch it when we upload it. If you can, help Golden State Times by doing that. Also, let Patriots know that we are covering everything that's going on with those whole Russia invasion, everything that has to do with Ukraine, and we also cover breaking news, politics, scoops, and everything else in between at our website, goldenstatetimes.com. Again, that's www.goldenstatetimes.com. Once again, there's a White House press briefing coming in just a few moments. Thanks so much, folks, and I hope to see you at that live stream that we're going to be starting in just a few moments. Peace.